The child perched on the stone steps like a bird with broken wings, small frame hunched against wind that carried the smell of autumn and diesel from the street beyond. Sterling Technologies rose behind her, a monument of glass and ambition that reflected clouds without caring what lived beneath them. Her dress cost more than most people made in a weak ivory silk that belonged at birthday parties not on cold granite in downtown Boston on a Monday afternoon in November. But money couldn't buy what she needed. The stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest proved that. Matted velvet, one missing eye, the kind of wear that came from years of desperate hugs in the dark. People flowed past in their important lives. Security personnel in crisp uniforms checking badges and perimeters. Executives in $1,000 shoes discussing mergers over Bluetooth earpieces. Administrative staff rushing between errands with coffee cups branded from places that charged $7 for foam. Not one of them paused. Not one registered that a 7-year-old sat alone while traffic hummed and strangers passed and the world demonstrated its fundamental indifference to small suffering. She'd been waiting there 90 minutes when Jack Morrison's path crossed hers. He came from the direction of the employee garage lunch bag, in one hand, ID badge clipped to his work shirt. The uniform identified him as facilities staff, the invisible class that kept buildings functional, while executives took credit for the lights staying on. 44 years of living had carved lines around his eyes and threaded silver through dark hair that had once been uniformly brown. His hands showed calluses from wrenches and screwdrivers rather than keyboards and conference calls. The boots he wore had steel toes and scuff marks that told stories about crawling through tight spaces where polished leather wouldn't survive. Something made him stop. Maybe the angle of her shoulders. Maybe the way she held that rabbit like it was the last solid thing in a world gone liquid. Maybe just the training that never fully left the ability to spot what didn't belong, what needed attention, what might be a threat or a victim depending on which direction you looked from. Jack knelt slowly, keeping distance so she wouldn't feel crowded. The paper bag crinkled when he opened it. She glanced up with eyes too old for her face green, like sea glass rimmed with evidence of tears recently shed or currently being fought back. No words came from her, just that exhausted stare of someone who'd stopped expecting adults to help. Bad day, silence answered. Her grip on the rabbit tightened. I know something about those. Jack unwrapped wax paper from a sandwich made that morning in a kitchen that barely fit a table and 2 chairs. Turkey Swiss cheese wheat bread, nothing fancy but constructed with the care of someone who knew hunger came in different forms. He tore it evenly and offered her the larger half. Looks like you need this more than I do. Her hand emerged slowly, small fingers accepting the gift with a child's gravity that understood gifts sometimes vanished when you blinked. The coldness of her skin against his palm registered like an alarm she'd been out here too long, temperature dropping as afternoon slid toward evening. A whisper barely audible over traffic, I'm Vivian. Good to meet you, Vivian, I'm Jack. He settled beside her on the step, maintaining respectful space between them. Cold seeped through his work pants from stone that never warmed even in summer. Better men had endured worse in places where cold came with bullets. This was just Boston in November. Manageable. Mind if I join you? She nodded once. Permission granted through silence. They sat while the city continued its urgent business around them. Jack took a bite from his half. Vivian studied hers like it might contain answers to questions she didn't know how to ask. Around them, Sterling Technologies processed its late afternoon shift changes, deliveries, meetings that would determine quarterly earnings and executive bonuses and stock prices that measured success in increments too small for human hearts to register. That rabbit looks like he's seen some action. Vivian's expression shifted ice-breaking on a frozen creek. His name is Admiral Patches. He lost his eye being brave. Brave how, in battles, against bad dreams. She hugged the rabbit closer. My daddy gave him to me before he left for the war. The sentence hit Jack like concussive force from an IED you didn't see coming. He recognized that construction, the careful past tense, the way children learn to talk about parents who stop coming home. His own son had developed the same linguistic armor after the funeral when black-suited strangers said things about heaven and peace in God's plan that didn't bring back the person who tucked you in at night. Sounds like your daddy knew how to pick the right protector. He was the bravest person ever. Vivian's voice carried the absolute conviction of a child repeating what she'd been told enough times to make it scripture. That's what Mommy says, but he didn't come back. She finally took a small bite of sandwich. Jack felt the weight of observations settle on his shoulders like a sniper's laser sight. Someone was watching from the building entrance. He didn't turn, didn't acknowledge. Just cataloged it with the automatic awareness that had kept him breathing through 5 years of deployments where attention to detail meant the difference between mission success and body bags. The moment stretched into something both fragile and profound. Two strangers connected by parallel losses sharing bread because sometimes that's all you could offer. And sometimes it was enough. 4:30 that morning had begun like every morning since Lisa died. Jack's internal clock triggered before his watch could beep, hand-moving automatically to silence an alarm that hadn't sounded. In mountains where enemy patrols passed meters from your hide site, learning to wake without noise kept you alive. Now it just prevented disturbing Declan's sleep in the next room of an apartment that measured worth in square footage, too expensive for what it offered. Their place occupied the third floor of a brownstone that developers hadn't gentrified yet. Two bedrooms separated by walls thin enough to hear plumbing in adjacent units. One bathroom with tiles that needed regrouting and a showerhead that leaked regardless of how many times Jack tightened it. Kitchen and living room combined into space where you could reach the refrigerator from the couch if you stretched. Furniture salvaged from curbsides and estate sales, functional rather than matching, clean rather than fashionable. Everything they owned existed within these walls. Everything that mattered slept down the hall in a room with drawings of laser-eyed dinosaurs taped above the bed. Jack eased Declan's door open with the silence of long practice. His son's breathing came steady and clear, chest rising and falling without the wheeze that sent them to emergency rooms when seasons changed or air quality dropped or invisible triggers activated lungs that couldn't be trusted. No fever tonight, no distress. Small mercies that felt enormous when you'd spent nights measuring each breath against the possibility of the next one not coming. The kitchen materialized through pre-dawn darkness. Coffee started first black and strong enough to strip paint, the way deployment taught you to drink it, when staying alert mattered more than taste. Declan's medications next arranged by his breakfast plate with military precision. 3 pills in descending size order, inhaler positioned where small hands could reach it, nebulizer standing ready if morning brought complications. Lunch assembly followed the ritual Jack had perfected over 3 years of single parenthood. Sandwich cut on the diagonal because Declan insisted triangular food tasted superior to rectangular. Apple rubbed until skin gleamed, juice box, folded note tucked inside with words his son wouldn't read until later. You're braver than you know. Love, Dad. Then came the accounting that defined their existence. Bills spread across the kitchen table in categories that had evolved into survival strategy. 3 stacks representing 3 realities. Jack had developed this system months after the funeral, when medical debt and ordinary expenses and the cost of staying alive converged into numbers that exceeded his capacity to ignore. Paid sat smallest, electric bill for $93 that kept lights functioning and refrigerator running. Water bill for $42 that ensured showers and clean dishes and basic sanitation. The minimums that prevented shutoff notices and maintained the infrastructure of normal life. Must pay dominated the middle position. Rent due in 6 days, $1,200 that would reduce his checking account to pocket change and prayer. Cell phone at $85 because modern existence required connectivity. Insurance premium for Declan at $340 monthly, the mandatory fee for accessing medications that cost more than Jack earned in a week. These weren't optional. These were the price of continuation. Impossible towered largest. Medical collection notices stamped in threatening red. Past due warnings written in language designed to shame debtors into payment. Physical therapy invoices from when Jack's knee collapsed under him 6 months ago. $950 for learning to walk without limping badly enough that his employer noticed. Credit card balances accumulated during Lisa's final months when he'd stopped working to stay by her hospital bed, while cancer consumed her faster than hope could sustain resistance. $6,200 of love converted into compound interest at rates that made bankruptcy feel inevitable. The pharmacy slip crowned the impossible stack. Declan's inhaler prescription needed refilling by Friday. $175 without insurance coverage. Their policy covered 80%. 20% of expensive remained too expensive when your bank account measured wealth in double digits until Wednesday's paycheck. Jack placed his last $20 bill into Declan's lunch envelope. The boy needed cafeteria money, needed to feel normal among classmates whose parents didn't count pennies, needed to not know how close to financial collapse they teetered every month. Jack would skip lunch today. Wouldn't be the first time. Wouldn't kill him. He'd operated 3 days without food during a mission that went sideways in Afghanistan. Missed meals meant nothing compared to his son's next breath. The refrigerator photograph commanded attention through morning dimness. Two soldiers in desert camouflage with arms around each other's shoulders grinning at a camera like they'd beaten death in a game. Death always eventually won. Jack on the left, younger by years that felt like decades, eyes not yet carrying the weight of survivor's guilt. David Sterling on the right, dark-haired and confident, the kind of leader who made impossible orders feel achievable. Handwriting at the bottom in David's distinctive scrawl, Kandahar 2019, Brothers Forever. Jack's fingers traced the image through plastic magnetized to metal. The familiar ache bloomed sharp behind his sternum. Still keeping the promise, brother, whatever it takes. Dad. Declan stood in the doorway wearing pajamas 3 sizes too large, hand-me-downs from neighbors whose kids outgrew clothes faster than Jack could afford to replace them. 7 years old and small for his age, all gangly limbs and untamable brown curls that defied combs and reason. He had Lisa's eyes warm and perceptive and capable of seeing through lies told for protection. Looking at his son hurt sometimes worse than shrapnel had. Other times it provided the only reason to keep breathing. You're making the worried face again. Jack's expression softened automatically. Just thinking, buddy. How's the breathing? Fine. Declan climbed into his chair and spotted Jack's collapsed lunch bag immediately. Small fingers poked the deflated paper. You did the sandwich sacrifice thing again, didn't you? What makes you think that your lunch looks empty and you always tell me soldiers need proper fuel when I don't want vegetables? Too observant, too smart. Jack ruffled his son's hair to hide the tightness spreading through his chest. Mrs. Peaton made extra casserole yesterday. She's packing me leftovers. The lie emerged smooth from years of practice. Declan didn't need to know Mrs. Peaton was visiting relatives in Connecticut, didn't need to know his father would work through lunch powered by coffee and willpower. Protection came in forms children shouldn't have to understand. Get dressed for school, soldier. Jack straightened and delivered a mock salute. Bus arrives in 20 minutes. Declan returned it with exaggerated seriousness, small hand pressed to his forehead. Sir. Yes, sir. After his son disappeared to change clothes, Jack leaned against the counter and allowed himself one moment of complete honesty, eyes closed, shoulders dropping, the crushing weight of responsibility acknowledged without witnesses. Father and mother simultaneously, bill payer and caretaker, protector against a world that didn't care if you succeeded or failed, lived or died, kept promises or broke them. The photograph pulled his attention again. David's frozen smile. The promise made before helicopters lifted toward a mission that became a massacre. Words exchanged in the pre-dawn darkness before loading gear. If I don't make it back, look after my family. Jack had carried those words for 5 years without knowing how to fulfill them. Had no idea where David's widow lived. No contact information for the daughter David showed photos of during rare downtime between operations. Just a promise growing heavier with each passing year, until it felt less like obligation and more like condemnation. Until today. Until a girl named Vivian on cold steps with a one-eyed rabbit that her father gave her before he left for a war that took him and sent Jack home. Fate had a sense of timing or cruelty. Sometimes the distinction didn't matter. Elena Sterling's office occupied the 25th floor with views that cost more than most people's houses. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Boston Harbor, stretching east toward an Atlantic that didn't care about human ambition. Morning light turned water into hammered silver, while below commuters surged through streets like antibodies fighting infection in a sick organism. She stood at the glass watching her city wake up and felt nothing. The numbness had become familiar. Comfortable almost. 5 years of building walls between herself and feeling had made ice seem natural, warmth seem dangerous. The office reflected calculated image rather than personal taste. Marble imported from quarries she'd never visited. Mahogany desk carved from a single tree felled somewhere in forests she'd never walk. Contemporary art praised by critics whose opinions she'd purchased along with the paintings. Everything precise. Everything expensive. Everything designed to project power to men who confused wealth with worth. Her suit charcoal gray, custom-tailored worth, more than her assistant made in a month, fit like armor because that's what it was. Hair pulled back severely enough to ache because softness invited attack. The board members who called her the Ice Widow when they thought she couldn't hear had no idea how accurate the nickname was. Ice didn't bleed. Ice didn't break. Ice endured. Her phone vibrated with morning briefings from Natalie Cross, her assistant, who scheduled her life in 15-minute increments. 14 meetings today. 6 requiring decisions affecting hundreds of employees. 3 involving board members actively plotting her removal. 1 with Dr. Catherine Brennan about security anomalies that kept appearing in reports like cancer cells in blood work. Elena pulled up Project Sentinel files on her computer. The quantum encryption system David had spent 5 years perfecting before Kandahar consumed him. Technology revolutionary enough to make billions. Dangerous enough to kill for. Valuable enough that someone inside Sterling Technologies was systematically creating backdoors through security protocols David had designed to be impenetrable. 47 unauthorized changes in 90 days, all using executive override credentials, all creating vulnerabilities that Dr. Brennan's team discovered and patched only to find new ones appearing like heads on a hydra. Someone was stealing David's legacy. Someone inside this building was betraying everything he had died to protect. Elena's jaw clenched hard enough to make her teeth ache. She'd built fortifications to protect Vivian and her self-money power reputation, the kind of ruthless competence that made men respect her even while they hated her for succeeding. But walls didn't catch traitors. Walls didn't deliver justice. Her private phone, the one only Vivian's nanny and security possessed, rang with a tone that sent adrenaline spiking through her bloodstream before conscious thought registered threat. She answered before the second ring. Panic flooded through the connection in the nanny's voice. "Mrs. Sterling, Vivian's missing." Everything stopped. Sound disappeared. The world narrowed to 3 words, and the roaring in her ears like standing too close to artillery fire. "Missing how?" "We were at the park. I looked away 30 seconds, and I've been searching 25 minutes. Security is checking cameras, but..." Elena was already moving heels, striking marble in staccato rhythm as she crossed to the elevator. "Did you check the school? Her friend's house?" "First places, I tried. Mrs. Sterling, I'm so sorry." "Find her." The command came out like breaking glass. "I'm coming down now." She terminated the call and stabbed the elevator button. The descent felt eternal, each floor a separate century, while her mind generated scenarios that ranged from probable to catastrophic. Vivian had run away twice in the past month, small rebellions that didn't travel far. Acting out, the therapist said, processing grief through boundary testing, learning that loss could happen again because the universe had already demonstrated its willingness to take people you loved. The elevator opened. Elena swept through the lobby, trailing security personnel scrambling to keep pace, through revolving doors into November cold that bit through expensive fabric, scanning the plaza for any sign of a child who just wanted someone to notice her existence. Then she saw them. The maintenance worker kneeling beside Vivian on the steps, sharing his lunch like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like feeding a stranger's hungry child mattered more than schedules and duties and whatever job waited inside. Relief hit first, sharp enough to be painful. Vivian was safe. Suspicion followed immediately after. 5 years of fighting hostile takeover attempts and corporate espionage had taught Elena that coincidence was usually camouflage. A strange man appearing exactly when her daughter ran away triggered every alarm she'd installed since David's death. She moved closer, quietly listening. Vivian's small voice carrying across granite. "My daddy gave him to me before he left for the war." The man's response gentle with real understanding. "Sounds like your daddy knew how to pick the right protector." Something in his tone stopped Elena's approach. Not manipulation, not performance. Genuine recognition from someone who'd stood in similar darkness. She pulled her phone and photographed his profile. Sent it to her head of security with one word: identify. The response arrived 90 seconds later. Jack Morrison, 44 Facilities Maintenance, hired November 2021. Background clean. Former Navy SEAL, honorable discharge 2019. Widower, one son, age 7. Currently assigned basement-level mechanical systems. Navy SEAL, the same as David, working in her building 3 years without her knowledge because she never looked at people who fixed pipes and changed light bulbs. Never saw them as human beings with histories and losses and lives that mattered. Shame twisted through her briefly before ice sealed over it again. Her phone vibrated with a message from the private investigator she'd hired to excavate truth from the classified rubble of David's death. New file marked urgent. Elena opened it standing on the plaza while her daughter ate half a sandwich from a stranger's lunch. The file contained a photograph. The same maintenance worker, 5 years younger, standing in desert camouflage beside David. Arms around each other's shoulders. Brothers in everything but blood. David's handwriting beneath Kandahar 2019. Brothers forever. The world tilted. Elena grabbed a stone pillar for balance. This wasn't random. This was David's last surviving teammate. The man who'd been there when her husband died. The man who came home alive when David came home in a flag-draped coffin. The man who'd worked in her building 3 years and never said a word. 6 hours after the sandwich, Jack stood in an office that existed on a different planet from the basement mechanical rooms where he normally worked. Windows displayed Boston like a conquest, while afternoon light turned the harbor into molten metal. The woman behind the mahogany desk radiated controlled fury barely contained beneath professional veneer. Elena Sterling slid a photograph across polished wood. Jack's heart stuttered. The same image he looked at every morning. The same 2 soldiers. The same words in David's handwriting. Her voice could have frozen the harbor solid. You recognize this. Statement not question. Accusation wrapped in ice. Jack's throat closed around words that didn't want to come. David Sterling, my CO, my teammate, my brother. Those glacial blue eyes dissected him without mercy, searching for lies, finding only truth. My husband, Vivian's father. Hearing the full name instead of the nickname made it real in ways that hurt. Jack felt the floor dissolving beneath his boots. 3 years in this building. 3 years of fixing broken things while walking over spaces where David had worked and dreamed and built the company that made his vision real. 3 years of anonymity evaporating in seconds. According to classified records, Elena's voice cut like surgical steel. You were the last person to see him alive. The room swam, marble and mahogany blurred, while Jack's vision tunneled. He'd taken this job because it was close to Declan's school, because the schedule allowed him to be present for drop-off and pickup, because it paid marginally better than other maintenance positions and medical debt required every extra dollar he could earn. He'd never known whose building he was cleaning. Elena stood and walked to the windows. Her reflection showed a woman maintaining composure through sheer force of will. 5 years, Mr. Morrison. 5 years wondering what happened in Kandahar. Why my husband didn't come home. Why you did. She turned and the ice cracked enough to reveal the wound beneath. Why you've worked in my building all this time without telling me who you were. I didn't know. The words scraped out rough and raw. I swear, Mrs. Sterling, I had no idea this was David's company. I work in basements, fix mechanical systems. They hired me under my wife's maiden name, Caldwell. I never made the connection. Your wife, dead 3 years, car accident, drunk driver. She was gone before paramedics arrived. Something shifted in Elena's expression, recognition of shared trauma. But she didn't soften, just continued her examination with eyes that had probably destroyed competitors and built empires from their wreckage. Tell me about Kandahar. Every instinct screamed refusal. The operation remained classified. The details were sealed behind clearances and need-to-know restrictions designed to bury truth deeper than graves. But this was David's widow, Vivian's mother, the family he'd promised to protect and failed to find. Maybe fate was offering a second chance, or a final test. 8-man team. Target was a compound suspected of weapons trafficking. David led the operation, I was second. The words came mechanical and mission-focused. We infiltrated at 0200. Found the compound, but no weapons, just computer equipment and communication gear. Elena's eyes sharpened like blades. Technology instead of weapons. David recognized it immediately, called for abort and extraction, said the intelligence was compromised. Jack's voice roughened with memory. That's when they hit us. Professional ambush. Coordinated. Like they knew our exact arrival time. Someone betrayed you. David figured it out fast. Ordered me to evacuate the wounded. Made it clear it was a direct command. The memory burned behind Jack's eyes, David's voice on the radio staying calm while chaos erupted around them. I refused to leave him, he said, Jack's voice fractured. Elena waited with stone patience. He said, get the wounded out, Morrison. That's an order. I'll cover your extraction. Last thing I heard before the radio died. But he didn't follow. No, ma'am. He held position so we could evacuate 3 casualties. Final transmission. Jack pulled a compass from his pocket. Brass worn smooth from years of handling. Glass scratched from hard use. David's lucky charm pressed into his hands 10 minutes before they boarded the helicopter. He gave me this, said to keep it safe, said he'd collect it when he got home. Elena's mask shattered. Tears she'd probably been holding 5 years finally escaped. She reached for the compass with trembling hands, held it like it contained fragments of her husband's soul. He never came home. No, ma'am. She composed herself with visible effort. When she looked up, the CEO had reconstructed, the Ice Widow restored. But Jack had seen beneath the armor now, seen the grief she carried like a second skeleton. The military reported David died in combat, enemy fire during our withdrawal. Her voice stayed level through monumental effort. But I hired investigators, spent 2 years and $600,000 uncovering what they wanted buried. She retrieved a file from a locked drawer, slid it across the desk. Jack opened it and felt reality shatter. Autopsy photographs, clinical and brutal. Ballistics analysis from experts who'd reviewed evidence officially destroyed. Conclusions that made Jack's blood run cold. David Sterling had been shot from behind. M4 rifle ammunition, American Standard issue. The same weapons their team carried. Not enemy combatants, not foreign hostiles. Murder by friendly fire. Execution by someone who knew exactly where to aim. Someone on your team killed my husband. Elena's voice could have carved marble. Someone still alive, still free, still profiting from whatever David died protecting. Jack couldn't breathe. The office spun while 5 years of guilt reconstructed around new truth. All the nightmares where he heard David's voice and couldn't reach him in time. All the wondering if different choices could have changed outcomes. All of it based on lies. David hadn't died covering their retreat heroically. He'd been murdered by someone wearing the same uniform. You blame me. The words emerged hollow. I did. Elena's honesty cut deeper than accusation. When I learned you survived and David didn't, I needed someone to hate. You were convenient. I hate myself enough for both of us. I know. She returned to the window silhouette against Boston's skyline. That's why I believe you didn't know. Guilt that deep doesn't perform. Silence stretched between them, heavy with parallel grief and unanswered questions neither could solve alone. I have a proposition. Elena turned, and now Jack saw the ruthless CEO who'd built empires from her husband's vision. Someone inside Sterling Technologies is stealing the technology David developed. Project Sentinel quantum encryption worth billions on the black market. 47 security breaches in 90 days. Whoever killed David is finishing what they started. She named a salary that made Jack's vision blur. Triple his current income. Comprehensive health insurance for him and Declan. Retroactive coverage for outstanding medical bills currently destroying his credit. His throat tightened around the question that mattered. What would I owe you, truth about Kandahar, and your help finding whoever murdered my husband? Jack looked at the compass in Elena's hands. The lucky charm that hadn't saved David. The promise he'd made and failed to keep for 5 years. Declan's face flashed through his mind, medical bills, prescription, due Friday futures, slipping away with each month's impossible pile of debt. But money wasn't why he would say yes. I made David a promise before Kandahar. His voice came out rough. If he didn't make it home, I'd protect his family. Elena's eyes glistened with tears she refused to shed. He trusted you with everything. Jack's jaw set with the kind of determination that had carried him through impossible missions in places where hope went to die. I'm a Navy SEAL, Mrs. Sterling. We don't break promises. Not ever. She almost smiled. Almost. Report to my office tomorrow at 7. We have work to do. And Mr. Morrison, call me Elena. We're going to be working too closely for formality. That night, after Declan slept peacefully with his nebulizer humming mechanical reassurance, Jack sat alone at the kitchen table under dim lighting that made the bills look slightly less threatening. The compass rested in his palm, brass warm from his grip. He examined it properly for the first time since David had pressed it into his hands with words Jack had interpreted as temporary farewell instead of permanent goodbye. Scratches covered its surface from years of deployment and hard use. But one mark along the bottom edge looked different, deliberate, precise, like someone had carved a hairline seam where brass met glass with intentional care. Jack rotated the compass under lamplight. The mark formed a division, a hidden separation. His pulse accelerated. He retrieved a butter knife from the drawer and worked its tip carefully into the seam. Something clicked inside a sound that didn't match the compass's normal mechanics. He twisted gently, testing pressure points, probing for weakness. Memories of that final night reconstructed with new context. The compound that should have held weapons, but contained only technology. The ambush that arrived too perfectly timed, too professionally coordinated for random enemy contact. David's calm voice issuing orders, even while bullets carved the darkness into lethal geometry. The way he'd pressed this compass into Jack's hands with eyes that communicated goodbye instead of see you soon. David had known, somehow impossibly he'd known he wasn't coming back from Kandahar. Jack increased pressure carefully. The seam resisted, then yielded fractionally. A millimeter of movement, but enough to confirm what instinct screamed. This compass held secrets. David had hidden something inside, something worth dying to protect, something he'd trusted Jack to discover when time made discovery necessary. But after 5 years, did Jack possess the skill to open it without destroying whatever lay inside? He set the compass down before impatience pushed him toward recklessness. This required proper tools, patience, maybe Elena's engineering team and equipment designed for precision work. But knowledge burned bright. David's final message waited inside this brass shell sealed like a time capsule from the dead to the living. Jack pulled out his phone, scrolled to a number dormant 3 years. Colonel Grant Matheson, their former commanding officer. The man who'd authorized David's mission. Who delivered the official report about heroic sacrifice and enemy action. Who maybe possibly knew truth buried beneath official lies. The phone rang 4 times before Gravel answered. Morrison, been expecting your call eventually. You knew. Long silence stretched across the connection. Then suspected, couldn't prove it, still can't definitively. David was murdered. Executed. Matheson corrected, and the word carried weight that murdered couldn't capture. By someone he trusted. Someone who spent 5 years covering tracks while getting rich selling American technology to hostile actors. Elena Sterling hired me to find them. Good. Satisfaction colored Matheson's tone. You'll need support. This reaches beyond corporate espionage, Morrison. There's a network. Pentagon officials, defense contractors, foreign operatives. David got too close to exposing them. That's why they eliminated him. Jack's grip tightened until the phone case creaked. Why didn't you tell me 3 years ago when I left the service? Because you had a son to raise and a wife to bury and demons enough without me adding more. Matheson paused. But if you're ready to engage now, I've accumulated 5 years of intelligence. And Morrison, watch your perimeter. Whoever killed David won't hesitate eliminating anyone who threatens their operation. The call ended. Jack sat in his kitchen, surrounded by shadows and half-paid bills and the weight of promises made to friends who didn't come home. Outside Boston slept peacefully, unaware that beneath its corporate towers and historic streets, people played games with technology and lives and secrets worth killing for. His phone buzzed, unknown number. Jack almost ignored it, then answered on reflex. Heavy breathing filled the line. Then a voice mechanically distorted beyond recognition. Stop investigating Morrison or your son pays the price. The connection died. Jack moved before conscious thought, completed feet carrying him to Declan's room, hand on the doorknob. Every sense straining for sounds that didn't belong. The door swung open. Declan slept peacefully, chest rising and falling, steady nebulizer humming its mechanical lullaby. Nothing disturbed, nothing wrong. But they knew about Declan, knew where Jack lived, knew enough to threaten the one thing that mattered more than missions or promises or justice for murdered brothers. Jack's hand found his phone again, fingers moving through contacts on autopilot. Matheson first brief message. They threatened my son, need secure location. Then Elena longer explanation about the call and what it meant operationally. Then Mrs. Piton next door asking if she could take Declan for a few days family emergency requiring his immediate absence from the city. He couldn't fight with Declan in the crosshairs, couldn't hunt traitors while protecting his son simultaneously. The choice burned like swallowing acid, but SEALs made hard calls. That's how they survived when others didn't. Tomorrow, Declan would go to Matheson's family compound in New Hampshire, safe behind walls and armed personnel and distance from Boston. Tomorrow, Jack would become the weapon his training had forged. Tomorrow, the hunt began properly. Tonight, he sat in Declan's room watching his son sleep and promised silently that whoever threatened his child would learn what happened when you cornered a combat veteran with nothing left to lose except the one person who made loss bearable. The compass sat heavy in his pocket. David's secrets waiting to be unlocked. David's killer still breathing free air. David's family now Jack's responsibility, vulnerable in ways neither father nor friend had anticipated 5 years ago in desert darkness, before helicopters lifted toward missions that became massacres. Outside Boston prepared for another day of commerce and ambition conducted in boardrooms instead of battlefields. Inside, Jack Morrison prepared for real war, the kind fought in shadows where enemies wore suits instead of uniforms. The kind where losing meant more than death, it meant failing everyone who'd ever trusted you to protect them when protection mattered most. He touched Declan's forehead one final time. Cool skin, steady breathing, safe for now. That would have to be sufficient. His phone buzzed again. Text from Elena. Security footage shows a vehicle tailing you from work. Registration traced to a shell corporation. This is real, Jack. They're already moving against you. Jack typed back one word, good. Let them come. Let them try. They'd killed David Sterling in Kandahar thinking that ended the threat. They'd underestimated what happened when you created new enemies while trying to eliminate old ones. They'd forgotten that some promises don't die with the people who made them. They transfer to the living and grow stronger with time. The compass clicked softly in his pocket. Secrets waiting. Truth buried, but not dead. Justice delayed, but inevitable. David's voice echoed from memory, calm and certain even as the world burned. Brothers forever, Morrison. No matter what happens next. Jack whispered to the darkness and his sleeping son and the ghost of a friend who trusted him with everything that mattered. Brothers forever, David. I'm coming for them. Every last one. Tomorrow the real mission began. Tonight he stood watch and prepared for war 5 years in the making. Dawn hadn't broken when Jack loaded Declan into Colonel Matheson's unmarked sedan, parked 3 blocks from their apartment. The boy clutched his backpack and a drawing of laser-eyed dinosaurs protecting Admiral Patches that Vivian had given him 2 days ago during their first playdate. Jack knelt on cold pavement that smelled like rain and exhaust. This is just for a little while, soldier. Uncle Grant's place has woods and a lake. You'll like it there. Declan's eyes, Lisa's eyes saw through the lie with 7-year-old clarity that made Jack's chest ache. You have the soldier-faced dad, the one from before Mom died. Jack's hands cupped his son's small face. I need you to be brave like Admiral Patches, okay? Can you do that for me? Is someone bad trying to hurt us? The question deserved honesty, not comfort. Jack had learned that much from deployments where lies got people killed. Someone bad is trying to hurt people I care about, which means I need you somewhere safe while I stop them. That's what soldiers do. We protect the people who can't protect themselves. Declan's chin trembled, but held firm. Will you come back? The words hit like close-quarters gunfire. Jack pulled his son into a hug that felt like holding the only good thing left in a world gone rotten. A real man always comes home to his family. And I'm a real man. Understand? Yes, sir. Matheson emerged from the driver's seat, 52 years old, silver-haired, wearing civilian clothes that couldn't disguise military bearing. He placed a hand on Jack's shoulder with the grip of someone who'd sent men into fire and counted the ones who didn't return. Safe house is off-grid. 3X Rangers on security detail. Nobody finds them unless I want them to. Jack straightened and gave Declan one last touch fingers through unruly curls that would never lie flat. 2 weeks maximum. Then we're getting ice cream, and you're telling me everything about the woods and the lake. Promise. On my life. Matheson's sedan disappeared into pre-dawn darkness. Jack stood on the empty street until taillights faded completely, then walked back to an apartment that felt cavernous without his son's breathing in the next room. His phone buzzed with a text from Matheson. Package secure, good hunting. Jack typed back, see you on the other side. Then he opened the drawer where he kept the Sig Sauer P he'd told himself he'd never need again after leaving the service. The weapon felt familiar in his hand weight, imbalance calibrated for killing at close range. He checked the magazine out of habit. 15 rounds, enough to start a war, not enough to finish one alone. Another text arrived this time from Elena. My office, 7 a.m. We need to talk about Vivian's safety. Jack glanced at the clock. 5:30. 90 minutes to shower dress and prepare for the conversation that would probably turn into the first real fight between people trying to protect the same child using incompatible strategies. He holstered the Sig and headed for the shower, already knowing how the argument would go. Elena's office looked different in early morning light. Less fortress, more fishbowl. Windows that projected power during business hours now revealed vulnerability, exposing her against the skyline, like a target waiting for the right shooter. She stood at the glass, wearing the same charcoal suit from yesterday, which meant she probably hadn't gone home. Probably spent the night reviewing security footage and financial records and the 1,000 other details that came with running a company while fighting invisible enemies. Jack entered without knocking. Her security chief, Marcus Webb, former Delta Force, built like a brick outhouse, stood in the corner with arms crossed, an expression radiating professional distrust. Elena turned from the window with eyes that hadn't seen sleep. Vivian needs to leave the city. Today. Jack's response came fast. Agreed. Matheson has a compound in New Hampshire. Secured perimeter, armed guards completely off-grid. No, Elena's voice could have cut diamonds. I'm sending her to my family's estate in Cape Cod. Private security team, 24-hour surveillance, close enough that I can reach her in 90 minutes if needed. Close enough that whoever threatened my son can reach her in 90 minutes too. Her eyes flashed cold fire. She's my daughter. This is my decision. Jack moved closer, invading the professional distance Elena maintained like a moat around a castle. David was my brother. I promised to protect his family. That includes making sure his daughter doesn't become a target because you're too proud to admit you can't control everything. Pride? Elena's voice dropped to something dangerous. You think this is about pride? I think it's about fear. You've already lost a husband. The idea of sending Vivian away where you can't see her terrifies you more than the idea of her being kidnapped. The slap came without warning, palm across his face, hard enough to snap his head sideways. The sound cracked through the office like a gunshot. Webb moved automatically toward intervention, but Jack raised a hand to stop him. His cheek burned where Elena's hand had connected. He didn't touch it, didn't retreat, just held her gaze while something broke behind the ice in her eyes. You have no right. Her voice shook for the first time since he'd met her. No right to stand there and tell me how to protect my child when you just sent your son away. Where's Declan right now? Jack's safe in New Hampshire with armed guards. That's what I thought. But somehow when I make the same calculation for Vivian, it's pride and fear instead of protection. Jack's jaw clenched hard enough to make teeth ache. The difference is I'm sending Declan to people trained to fight a war. You're sending Vivian to a security team trained to stop paparazzi and drunk wedding guests. These aren't the same threats. Then teach them. Elena's hands balled into fists at her sides. Come to Cape Cod, train my security team, make them as ready as Matheson's people. But I am not sending my 7-year-old daughter to live with strangers 3 hours away where I can't reach her. The silence stretched taut between them, two people trying to protect the same child using different mathematics of risk. Jack saw it clearly. Elena's entire world had condensed to the single point of keeping Vivian close after losing David to distance and duty. Asking her to let go was asking her to repeat the trauma that had turned her into ice. His voice came out softer, stripped of combat edge. I'm not the enemy here, Elena. Then stop acting like I'm an obstacle to overcome. Her composure cracked, further showing the exhausted mother beneath the CEO armor. I've approved every mission, signed every deployment, sent David into hell a dozen times because he convinced me it mattered. I sent him to Kandahar and he didn't come back. I won't do that with Vivian. I can't. Jack took a breath that felt like swallowing broken glass. He'd spent 3 years preparing to die for Declan if necessary, but the harder challenge was living through each day without Lisa. Elena faced the same calculation from the opposite direction. Okay. Jack's shoulders dropped with something that might have been surrender or might have been understanding. Cape Cod, but I'm coming with her, and Webb here is going to give me complete access to his security plans so I can find every hole before someone else does. Elena nodded once, sharp and decisive. Then her knees buckled slightly, and Jack moved, automatically catching her elbow before she fell. She jerked away from the contact like it burned, but not before he felt her trembling. When did you last sleep? When did you? Her deflection came reflexive. Tush. Jack almost smiled. We should probably both sleep before we get your daughter killed through exhaustion and bad decisions. Elena almost smiled back. Almost. There's a couch in my private office. 6 hours, then we move Vivian at 1400 hours. Webb will brief you at 1300. Agreed. They stood there awkwardly, neither moving toward the promised rest, both recognizing that something had shifted between them during the fight. Not trust exactly, not partnership yet, but maybe the beginning of understanding that they were rowing the same direction even if their oars hit water at different rhythms. Elena spoke first, voice barely above a whisper. I can't lose her too, Jack. She's all I have left of David. If something happens to her because I made the wrong call, nothing's going to happen. Jack heard the certainty in his own voice and wondered if it was promise or prayer. We're going to find whoever killed David, and we're going to protect both our kids while we do it. That's not negotiable. Elena held his gaze, searching for weakness or doubt, finding only the same stubborn determination that had probably kept him alive through missions that killed better men. She nodded slowly. Get some sleep, Jack. You look like hell. Back at you, boss. He turned toward the door before the moment could stretch into something neither of them was ready to handle. Behind him, Elena's voice stopped his exit. Jack, thank you for caring about her safety even when it means fighting with me. He didn't turn around. That's what brothers do, even the ones who came home when they weren't supposed to. The text arrived at 11 p.m. while Jack was reviewing security protocols in the cramped office Webb had provided. 3 words from an unknown number. Parking garage, B3, now. Jack checked the SIG in his shoulder holster and took the stairs instead of the elevator. Old habits from places where ambushes happened in confined spaces. The garage occupied the building's lowest level, a concrete maze of support pillars and shadows that smelled like motor oil and exhaust. His footsteps echoed off bare walls as he descended. Dr. Catherine Brennan waited beside a silver Volvo, illuminated by flickering fluorescent lights that turned her face into alternating zones of exposure and concealment. 38 years old, red hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and an MIT sweatshirt instead of the professional attire she displayed in engineering meetings. She held a tablet like a shield against her chest. Jack approached with the careful awareness of someone who'd walked too many routes where friendly faces concealed hostile intent. Doctor, this couldn't wait until morning. If I'm seen talking to you during business hours, people will ask questions I can't answer safely. Her eyes darted toward the garage entrance, then back to Jack. I've been documenting the security breaches for 6 months. 47 protocol changes, all creating backdoors into Project Sentinel. All authorized using executive override credentials that should only work for 3 people. Elena Richard Blackwell, and who? David Sterling's master access, which should have been deactivated when he died. Catherine's fingers flew across the tablet, pulling up files that made Jack's blood pressure spike. But someone's been using it. Someone who knows encryption architecture well enough to hide their tracks from my security sweeps. She showed him transaction records, $15 million, flowing through shell corporations registered in the Cayman, Singapore, Luxembourg. Communication intercepts with known technology brokers who sold American secrets to hostile nations. A network so extensive it made Jack's head spin trying to track all the connections. This is bigger than corporate espionage. Jack scrolled through evidence that would trigger FBI raids and congressional investigations if it became public. This is treason. It gets worse. Catherine pulled up new files, these ones marked with red classification headers Jack recognized from his SEAL days. Sentinel isn't just encryption technology. It's a quantum key distribution system that makes traditional hacking impossible. But to activate it requires dual biometric authentication day verification from two sources. Jack's throat tightened. David and who? Originally David and Elena. After his death, the system defaulted to Elena, and Catherine's voice dropped to barely audible. Vivian. The only two people on Earth with sufficient genetic markers to substitute for David's DNA profile. The implications hit like a tactical nuke. Jack grabbed Catherine's arm harder than he intended. They don't just want the technology. They need Vivian alive and accessible to activate the system. Exactly. Which means the gunshot came from darkness beyond the Volvo muzzle flash, illuminating a figure in black tactical gear 30 meters away. Catherine jerked sideways as the round caught her shoulder, spinning her into Jack's arms. He pulled her behind the concrete support pillar as two more shots sparked off the column where her head had been seconds earlier. Jack drew the SIG and returned fire 3 rounds toward the muzzle flash, forcing the shooter into cover behind a parked sedan. Catherine gasped against his chest, blood spreading across her sweatshirt in a pattern that made Jack's combat medic training scream priorities. How bad? Shoulder. Through and through, I think. Her voice came tight with pain. There's a trauma kit in my car. Back seat. Jack evaluated at angles and options with the cold calculation that had kept him breathing through firefights in Fallujah and Kandahar. The Volvo sat 5 meters away. The shooter had position advantage from elevated parking levels. No backup inbound because nobody knew they were here. On 3, you're going to run for your car while I provide cover. Get in the driver's seat and start the engine. Understand. Catherine nodded, face pale but focused. Jack counted down with fingers, then broke cover, laying suppressive fire at the sedan. Catherine sprinted for the Volvo, while Jack put rounds through the sedan's windshield and engine block. The shooter returned fire, but the angles were wrong. Now Jack had forced him defensive. Catherine reached her car and yanked the door open. Jack fired his last 3 rounds and ran sliding across the Volvo's hood as bullets chewed concrete where his feet had been. He landed beside the driver's door and pulled Catherine across to the passenger seat, taking the wheel himself. Where's the exit that doesn't take us past the shooter? East ramp. Behind you and left. Catherine pressed her hand against the shoulder wound, blood seeping between fingers. Jack, you need to know they've been planning this for months. The kidnapping. They have inside help. Someone close to Elena who's feeding them information about security schedules and safe house locations. Jack reversed hard enough to make tires scream, then threw the Volvo into drive and accelerated toward the east ramp. Behind them, the shooter emerged from cover but didn't pursue. Smart tactical decision objective was silencing Catherine, not engaging in a running gun battle through downtown Boston. They burst onto street level, doing 60 in a 30 zone. Jack headed north toward Massachusetts General Hospital, weaving through late-night traffic while Catherine's breathing grew labored. Stay with me, Doc. Tell me about the inside help. Natalie Cross, Elena's assistant. Catherine's words came punctuated by gasps. I found emails between her and Richard Blackwell. Not official company business. Personal. Strategic. They're planning something big. Soon. Jack's hands tightened on the wheel. The assistant who'd been overly helpful when he first started investigating. Who knew Elena's schedule down to 15-minute increments? Who had access to security protocols and safe house locations and every detail that would make kidnapping Vivian possible? How sure are you? 90%. But I can't prove it without access to her personal devices, which requires warrants we don't have time to. Catherine's voice cut off as unconsciousness took her. Jack pushed the Volvo harder, running red lights with one hand while calling 911 with the other. He fed the dispatcher their location and Catherine's condition, then hung up and dialed Elena. She answered on the first ring, voice sharp with concern. Jack, it's 11:30. What? Catherine Brennan was just shot in Sterling's parking garage. She's alive but critical. Headed to Mass General now. Jack took a corner, hard enough to make the Volvo's suspension scream. Elena, they need Vivian's DNA to activate Sentinel. She's not just a target, she's the key to everything. Silence on the line, the kind that came before explosions. Then Elena's voice, colder than Jack had ever heard it. I'm moving her tonight, not Cape Cod. Somewhere they can't find. Somewhere I control completely. Wait for me. Don't move her without... This is my daughter, Jack. My decision. You focus on keeping Catherine alive and finding out who shot her. I'll protect Vivian. The line went dead. Jack cursed and pushed the Volvo faster, racing toward the hospital with a bleeding engineer and the sinking certainty that events were accelerating beyond anyone's control. Catherine's eyes fluttered open, briefly focusing on Jack with effort. The compass. David hid something in the compass. You need to open it. Then she was gone again, consciousness retreating, while sirens wailed in the distance, and Jack wondered how many people would have to bleed before this war finally ended. Mass General's emergency department moved with practiced chaos, nurses triaging Catherine's gunshot wound, doctors barking orders, Jack relegated to the waiting room with forms he couldn't complete because he didn't know her insurance information or emergency contacts or any of the bureaucratic details that mattered more to hospitals than saving lives. Elena arrived 20 minutes later, still wearing yesterday's suit makeup smeared from exhaustion, or tears, or both. She found Jack in the waiting room and collapsed into the chair beside him without speaking. They sat in fluorescent silence while other people's emergencies played out around them. Domestic violence, drug overdoses, cardiac events that turned Mondays into memory. Finally, Elena spoke, voice raw. Webb has a team moving Vivian to the Cape Cod house in 2 hours. I wanted to tell you before I did something unilateral that you'd hate me for. Jack turned to look at her properly. The Ice Widow facade had melted completely, leaving someone who looked breakable and human, and terrified in ways that power couldn't protect against. He made a decision that felt reckless and necessary simultaneously. I'm coming with her, not because I don't trust your security, because I need to know she's safe with my own eyes. You barely know her. I know she's David's daughter. I know she shares lunch with strangers and names stuffed rabbits Admiral Patches and asked me if her daddy could see her from heaven. Jack's voice roughened. I know she's 7 years old and scared and shouldn't have to understand why adults are pointing guns at people in parking garages. That's enough. Elena's composure cracked. Tears she'd probably been holding for hours finally escaped, tracking mascara down her cheeks in dark rivers. Jack did what instinct demanded, and Lisa's memory whispered was right. He pulled Elena into a hug that felt awkward and necessary. She stiffened initially, then surrendered, pressing her face against his shoulder, while sobs racked through her in waves. Jack held her and said nothing because words couldn't carry weight that comfort required. Sometimes protection meant being present while other people fell apart. When the storm passed, Elena pulled back far enough to meet his eyes. Her voice came out wrecked but steady. I'm sorry I slapped you. I'm sorry I implied you didn't love your daughter enough. You were right, though. I am terrified. Every decision feels like I'm choosing between keeping her close and keeping her safe, and I don't know which one matters more. Elena wiped her face with palms that came away black with ruined makeup. David always knew what to do, how to balance risk against reward, how to make the hard calls without second-guessing himself into paralysis. Jack found himself speaking truth he hadn't intended to share. David second-guessed everything, kept me awake half the night before missions, asking if we'd planned for contingencies nobody rational would anticipate. The difference was he made decisions anyway, acted despite uncertainty instead of waiting for perfect information that never came. Something shifted in Elena's expression, recognition maybe, or permission to be human instead of superhuman. He really talked about me on deployments. Called you his North Star, said no matter how lost he got, you guided him home. Jack paused. Guess he was wrong about that last part. Elena's laugh came bitter. He guided himself into a bullet from his own team. Nothing I could have done would have brought him home from that. They sat together in the waiting room while doctors worked on Catherine and the night deepened toward morning. Webb called to confirm Vivian was secure at the Cape House. Matheson texted that Declan had caught 3 fish and demanded to keep them as pets. Small normalcies punctuating crisis. Eventually, a surgeon emerged with news that Catherine would survive, but needed surgery to repair damaged tissue. Stable for now. Lucky the shooter had missed major arteries. Questions about how this happened and had Jack filed a police report, and did he understand that gunshot wounds required mandatory reporting to law enforcement? Jack deflected with practiced vagueness, while Elena handled the bureaucracy that money and influence could smooth. They left the hospital at 3 a.m. exhausted beyond coherent thought. In the parking garage, different city, but close enough to trigger sense memory. Elena stopped before getting into her town car. Come back to my place. We need to open that compass, and I have tools that might work without destroying whatever's inside. Jack knew what she was offering: access to David's private workshop, the space where he'd built dreams and prototypes, and the technology people were willing to kill for. Sacred ground for a widow who'd kept it sealed since the funeral. You sure? No, but Catherine almost died telling us to open it, so waiting seems like disrespecting her sacrifice. Elena's jaw set with determination that made her look more like the CEO who'd built empires than the grieving wife who'd lost direction. And Jack, when we find out what David hid inside that compass, we're going to use it. Whatever it takes, whoever we have to destroy. They killed my husband and shot Catherine and threatened our children. I'm done being defensive. Jack recognized that tone, had heard it in commanders right before decisive action replaced cautious planning. What exactly are you proposing, Omar? Elena's eyes reflected street lights like chips of blue ice. The kind where we stop reacting and start hunting. David prepared for this possibility. He wouldn't have hidden something in a compass he gave you unless it was meant to be used when everything else failed. So let's fail forward. Jack almost smiled. That's the most military thing I've heard you say. I was married to a soldier for 10 years. Some lessons stick. She opened the town car door and slid inside. You coming or planning to stand in this garage all night analyzing tactical doctrine? Jack got in. The driver knew better than to ask questions. They rode through pre-dawn Boston in silence, heading toward revelations neither of them was truly ready to face. Elena's home occupied a brownstone in Beacon Hill that had probably cost more than Jack would earn in 3 lifetimes. Inside, expensive minimalism met careful preservation. Original hardwood floors restored moldings, furniture that balanced aesthetics with function. But she led him past the showpiece rooms to a door at the back of the first floor that opened onto stairs descending into converted basement space. David's workshop. The room smelled like solder and machine oil, and the particular scent that came from electronics left powered but unused. Workbenches lined 3 walls covered in equipment that ranged from precision tools to oscilloscopes to a 3D printer that probably cost 6 figures. Whiteboards filled with equations Jack couldn't parse but recognized as genius. Prototypes in various stages of completion, each labeled with David's neat handwriting, describing function and iteration number. Elena stood in the doorway like she was entering a tomb. I haven't been down here since the funeral. Couldn't bring myself to touch anything. Like maybe if I left it exactly as he'd had it, some part of him would still... Her voice broke. She didn't finish the thought. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, gentle pressure that communicated presence without demanding response. She leaned into it briefly, then pulled away and crossed to a particular workbench where precision instruments lay organized with the care of the someone who understood that tools mattered. Give me the compass. Jack handed over the brass artifact he'd carried for 5 years without understanding its true purpose. Elena examined it under a magnifying lens, fingers tracing the seam he'd discovered. This is deliberate. David carved this separation himself. See how the line follows the natural grain of the brass? He wanted it to blend, but still be findable by someone who looked carefully. She selected a tool that looked like a dental pick. Hold it steady while I work the seal. Jack supported the compass while Elena worked the pick into the seam with surgeon precision. Minutes passed marked only by their breathing and the tiny clicks of metal against metal. Then something gave a release mechanism Jack's crude attempts with a butter knife had never triggered. The bottom of the compass rotated free. Inside, cushioned by foam cut to exact specifications, sat a microchip smaller than a rice grain, and beneath it, folded into a square the size of a postage stamp paper covered in David's handwriting. Elena's hands trembled as she unfolded the letter. Jack read over her shoulder, David's voice emerging from the page like a ghost achieving momentary solidity. Elena, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. For Kandahar, for leaving you, for all the missions that took me away from you and Vivian, when I should have been home, being the husband and father you deserved. The chip contains the kill switch for Sentinel. If the system is ever compromised, this can shut it down remotely and permanently. I built it because I knew someone would eventually try to steal what we created. I hid it because I couldn't trust anyone inside the company except you. But this isn't really about technology. It's about trust and love and the terrible mathematics of protecting people you care about. You'll want revenge when I'm gone. That's natural. That's human. But revenge isn't the same as justice, and justice isn't the same as protection. Morrison is reading this too, I expect. Jack, brother, you followed orders in Kandahar even when every instinct screamed to stay and fight beside me. That took more courage than staying would have required. Now I'm giving you new orders, protect my family. Not by dying for them, by living for them. By showing Vivian that good men exist who keep promises and choose honor over convenience. Elena and Jack, you're going to fight. About Vivian, about methods, about risk assessment and control. That's fine. Fight well. Fight honestly. But remember, you're on the same side. The real enemy isn't each other. There's a network stealing American technology and selling it to hostile actors. I got too close to exposing them. That's why I'm dead. Attached to this chip is enough evidence to burn their entire operation to ash, financial records, communication intercepts, names that reach into the Pentagon and defense industry. Use it carefully. Trust no one inside Sterling Technologies except Catherine Brennan. Everyone else is potentially compromised. Final thoughts, Elena. You're stronger than you know. Vivian needs your strength, not your grief, Jack. You're a better man than you believe. Declan needs your presence, not your guilt. Both of you, sometimes protection means living for people, not dying for them. It's the harder choice. Make it anyway. Brothers forever, Morrison. That doesn't end with death. It transfers to the living and grows into something bigger. Love always, David. The letter ended. Elena stood motionless, tears streaming silently down her face. Jack felt his own vision blur with moisture. He couldn't wipe away fast enough. They'd both been carrying David's death like crosses too heavy to bear. Now his voice reached across 5 years to tell them they'd been carrying them wrong. Lena spoke first, voice wrecked. He knew. Before Kandahar, he knew someone on his team would kill him. That's why he gave me the compass, why he made sure I evacuated with it instead of staying to fight. Jack's chest felt hollowed out. He sacrificed himself to get this evidence out. Everything else, the mission, the objectives, it was all secondary to making sure this chip survived. Then we use it. Elena wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing tears and makeup into war paint. We upload this evidence, trigger investigations, burn everyone involved, and put Vivian in the crosshairs when they realize the kill switch is active, and the only way to reactivate Sentinel is through her DNA. Jack shook his head. We need to think this through. David said to use it carefully. That means strategy, not revenge. Elena's expression hardened. My daughter was just moved to a safe house because people want to kidnap her and use her DNA as a biological key. Catherine is in surgery because she tried to warn us. David is dead because he got too close to the truth. When exactly does careful stop meaning paralyzed and start meaning decisive? They faced each other across David's workbench, the ghost of a dead friend hovering between them, with wisdom neither wanted to accept fully. Jack understood her rage, had felt it himself every time another bill landed in the impossible pile, every time Declan wheezed through another asthma attack, every time he remembered Lisa dying because a drunk driver couldn't be bothered to call a cab. Well, but rage didn't win wars. Discipline did. Planning did. Patience that felt like cowardice until the right moment transformed it into decisive action. We do both. Jack picked up the microchip, holding it like the weapon it represented. We prepare to use this, but first we find out who's on the inside, who Richard Blackwell is working with, why Natalie Cross is feeding him information. We gather enough evidence that when we activate the kill switch, the entire network burns simultaneously instead of just scattering to rebuild somewhere else. Elena considered this CEO mind processing variables and probabilities. How long? 48 hours. Maybe less if Matheson's intelligence network can identify key players. Jack met her eyes. But we do it my way. Military precision, not corporate maneuvering. Can you accept that? She almost smiled. Can you accept that I'm still your boss and get final approval on any plan that affects my company or my daughter? As long as you accept that I'm the guy David trusted to protect his family, which means I get veto power on anything that puts Vivian at unnecessary risk. They shook hands across the workbench, awkward, informal, and deeply strange given that they'd held each other crying less than an hour ago. But it established rules of engagement for the partnership neither had asked for, but both desperately needed. Elena's phone buzzed. She checked it, and her expression shifted from determination to alarm. Emergency board meeting. Richard Blackwell called it for 9 a.m. She glanced at her watch, 5 hours from now. What's the agenda? Vote of no confidence. In me. Jack's strategic mind engaged immediately. He's accelerating the timeline. Knows we're getting close and wants to remove you before you can act. Or it's legitimate and I've been so focused on conspiracy that I've neglected actual governance issues. Elena rubbed her temples. God, I'm too tired to think clearly. Then sleep, 4 hours minimum. I'll stay here, review David's evidence on the chips, start building the case. Jack gestured at the workshop around them. You have equipment here that can read this data. Everything you need. Computer password is Vivian's birthday 071-22017. Elena moved toward the stairs, then paused. Jack, thank you for being here, for caring when you didn't have to. David was my brother. That makes Vivian family. Family isn't optional. Elena nodded and climbed the stairs, exhaustion visible in every step. Jack listened until her footsteps faded, then turned to David's computer and began the work of transforming evidence into ammunition. The sun rose over Boston while Jack cataloged names and accounts and connections that painted a picture of corruption so extensive it made his head spin. Richard Blackwell appeared repeatedly, financial transfers, encrypted communications meetings with defense contractors who had security clearances that shouldn't have allowed them anywhere near Sterling Technologies. But there was someone else, someone whose name appeared in metadata and communication logs, but never explicitly identified. Someone feeding Blackwell information about security protocols and safe house locations and operational planning. Someone close enough to Elena to know details that should have been compartmentalized. Jack pulled up employee records cross-referencing access logs with suspicious activities. The pattern emerged slowly, then all at once, with the clarity that came from looking at data without emotional investment. Natalie Cross, Elena's assistant, the woman who scheduled meetings and managed calendars and had access to literally every aspect of Elena's professional and personal life. Catherine had been right. The insider was sitting 20 feet from Elena's office feeding intelligence to the enemy while maintaining perfect cover as loyal staff. Jack checked the time. 7:30 a.m. The board meeting started in 90 minutes. He needed to wake Elena and explain what he'd found. Needed to convince her to act without alerting Natalie that her cover was blown. He climbed the stairs and found Elena's bedroom door open. The CEO passed out on top of the covers, still wearing her suit. Jack knocked gently on the doorframe. Her eyes opened immediately. The instant alertness of someone who'd learned sleep was a luxury that could be interrupted any moment. What did you find? Everything. And it's worse than we thought. The boardroom occupied Sterling Technologies' top floor, with windows that turned Boston into a conquest spread beneath corporate power. 12 board members assembled around a table that probably cost more than Jack's car suits and ties, and carefully maintained facades of competence, masking the usual mix of competence, incompetence, and active malice that characterize any group with sufficient authority to destroy what they couldn't build. Richard Blackwell sat at the head opposite Elena, silver-haired and confident, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. 55 years old and physically imposing, the kind of man who'd probably been handsome before age and ambition hardened his features into something predatory. Jack stood against the back wall beside Webb, technically present as security, but really there to observe and assess threats. Elena had briefed him on each board member during the ride over, who could be trusted, who was compromised, who was just weak enough to follow whoever projected confidence. Richard opened with practiced concern. Thank you all for responding to my emergency request. I've called this meeting because Sterling Technologies faces a leadership crisis that threatens our viability. Murmurs around the table, some supportive, some skeptical, all political. Elena Sterling is an exceptional CEO by many measures, but recent events reveal judgment failures that put our company at risk. Hiring unvetted consultants. His eyes flicked toward Jack with military backgrounds, but no corporate experience. Security breaches occurring weekly. Valued employees being shot in our own parking garage. He paused for effect. These aren't signs of strong leadership. These are symptoms of someone overwhelmed by responsibilities she can no longer manage effectively. Elena's expression could have frozen nitrogen. Are you proposing we replace security protocols or replace me, Richard? Because if it's the former, I welcome suggestions. If it's the latter, I remind you that my contract requires supermajority vote for termination without cause. I'm proposing we bring in outside management consultants to assess operational effectiveness and recommend structural changes. Richard's tone stayed reasonable, but Jack recognized the tactic established momentum toward removal by framing it as process rather than power grab. Naturally, that assessment would include leadership evaluation. Before Elena could respond, Natalie Cross entered, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression of practiced distress. She crossed to Elena and whispered something that made the CEO's face go pale. Elena stood abruptly. We're recessing. 10 minutes. We're in the middle of, Richard started. 10 minutes. Elena's voice carried enough command authority to make seasoned board members flinch. She swept from the room with Natalie trailing. Jack followed automatically, Webb close behind. In the hallway, Elena grabbed Natalie's tablet and read whatever message had triggered the recess. Her hands started shaking. Jack moved closer. What happened? Elena's voice came out hollow. The Cape Cod safe house. Someone they breached security. Vivian's. She couldn't finish the sentence. Jack grabbed the tablet. Security alert from Webb's team breach. Unknown hostiles. Subject compromised. Requesting immediate backup. The timestamp showed 12 minutes ago. Jack's training engaged suppressing panic in favor of tactical assessment. How many guards on site? 6. Former Secret Service. Best available. Elena looked like she might collapse. I should have sent her to New Hampshire. You were right. I was later. Jack cut her off without gentleness. Right now we move. Webb, get your tactical response team rolling. I'm calling Matheson for military-grade backup. Elena found her voice steadier now that crisis demanded action over analysis. I'm coming. No, you're staying here maintaining the appearance that nothing's wrong. Jack gripped her shoulders. If we both disappear, Richard will know something's happened. He might be coordinating this. We can't give him that leverage. That's my daughter. And she needs us thinking clearly, not reacting emotionally. Jack gentled his tone slightly. Trust me, I've extracted hostages from worse situations. But I need you here playing politics, buying time for the rescue operation. Natalie spoke up, voice quavering with perfect concern. Mrs. Sterling, I can manage the board meeting. Postpone the vote, cite security concerns. Give you time to... No, Jack cut across her smoothly. Elena stays, shows strength, shows confidence. The board needs to see their CEO functioning under pressure, not hiding from it. Elena's jaw clenched, but she nodded. Go, bring her back. Jack was already moving, pulling his phone to call Matheson, while Webb coordinated his team. Behind them, Natalie watched with eyes that Jack noted stayed too calm for someone whose boss's daughter had just been kidnapped. He'd deal with her later. Right now, getting Vivian back alive mattered more than exposing traitors. The war had just gone from shadow conflict to open combat, and Jack was done fighting defensively. Jack's truck hit 90 on Route 3 heading toward Cape Cod. Webb's tactical team, following in 2 black Suburbans, while Matheson coordinated military backup via secure channels. The drive should have taken 90 minutes. Jack made it in 53 running lights, in weaving through traffic with the kind of aggressive driving that would have earned tickets if police had been able to catch him. Webb rode shotgun, coordinating with his team on site through encrypted comms. Status report. The response came fragmented through static and what sounded like suppressed gunfire. 3 hostiles down, 3 remaining in the house with the package. They're demanding helicopter transport and safe passage. Standard kidnapping protocol. Negative on concessions. Webb's voice stayed flat and professional. Maintain perimeter. Tactical response inbound ETA 12 minutes. Jack pushed the accelerator harder. 12 minutes was eternity when your brother's daughter was being held at gunpoint by professionals who'd already demonstrated willingness to kill. The Cape House appeared ahead, modern glass and steel architecture designed for summer vacations, now transformed into a combat zone with vehicles blocking the driveway and security personnel positioned behind cover. Jack parked 200 meters out and approached on foot with the SIG drawn and ready. Webb deployed his team with practiced efficiency, 2 flanking left, 2 flanking right, Webb and Jack taking center approach. The kind of tactical formation Jack had executed dozens of times in Fallujah and Kandahar now applied to American soil against American criminals. Movement in an upstairs window, brief silhouette of someone small, being moved away from exposure. Vivian alive meant negotiations possible. Jack keyed his radio to the frequency Webb's team was monitoring. "This is Morrison. I'm going in the front door. When I engage, you breach from the back." Webb grabbed his arm. "That's not protocol. We wait for their demands, establish communication work toward peaceful resolution." They shot Catherine Brennan in a parking garage. They don't want peaceful resolution. Jack shook off Webb's grip. "David Sterling was my brother. That little girl is my family. I'm not waiting for them to panic and start executing hostages." He moved before Webb could argue further, crossing open ground toward the front entrance with the kind of calculated recklessness that separated successful operations from clustered failures. The door was reinforced, but the frame showed damage from the initial breach, improvised battering ram, probably vehicle-mounted. Jack kicked it open and entered low and fast. The first hostile appeared from the living room doorway, already firing. Jack put 2 rounds center mass and kept moving, muscle memory from close quarters combat training, taking over conscious thought. Second hostile emerged from the kitchen. Jack's 3rd round caught him in the throat, 4th in the chest as he fell. Vivian's scream came from upstairs. Jack took the stairs 3 at a time while Webb's team breached the back entrance with flashbangs that turned the ground floor into thunder and lightning. The 3rd hostile stood in the hallway holding Vivian against his chest with a pistol pressed to her temple. "Drop it or she dies." Jack didn't drop it, didn't slow. Read the angles and distances with the kind of instant calculation that came from 10,000 hours of range training. The hostile's gun wasn't cocked. His finger rested on the trigger guard instead of the trigger itself. Amateur mistake. Professional kidnapper would have had the weapon ready to fire. Jack shot him through the right eye from 8 feet away. The hostile dropped like electricity had been cut, pistol clattering harmlessly to hardwood. Vivian stood frozen in shock for 3 seconds, then ran to Jack sobbing while he caught her with his free hand and pulled her against his chest. "I've got you. You're safe. I've got you." Webb cleared the upstairs rooms methodically while Jack carried Vivian downstairs and outside to where EMTs waited with blankets and trauma counseling. She clung to Admiral Patches somehow. The rabbit had survived the kidnapping intact and refused to release Jack's hand, even when the paramedics tried to examine her for injuries. "Where's Mommy?" "Boston, waiting for you. We're going to call her right now." Jack pulled his phone and dialed Elena, who answered before the first ring completed. "Is she Kim Sunihawam?" "Safe, unharmed. 3 hostiles neutralized, 3 more captured during initial breach." Jack kept his voice steady despite the adrenaline crash making his hands shake. "We're coming home." Elena's sob of relief carried clearly through the connection. "Let me talk to her." Jack handed the phone to Vivian, who pressed it against her ear with both hands. "Mommy, the bad men scared me, but Mr. Jack saved me, and Admiral Patches was very brave." And her words tumbled over each other in the breathless rush of a 7-year-old processing trauma through narrative. Jack stepped out away to give her privacy and found Webb examining the 3 bodies his team had secured. "Clean shots, textbook execution." Webb didn't sound approving. "Also completely outside protocol and grounds for criminal charges if they'd been holding the actual weapons. They were kidnappers who breached a secure facility and held a child hostage." I assessed the threat and neutralized it. Jack's tone allowed no space for argument. You want to file paperwork about it? Go ahead. I'll be at the hospital with Vivian explaining to her mother why I didn't wait for your negotiation team to get 3 people killed. Webb studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. David Sterling picked the right man to trust with his family. They drove back to Boston with Vivian sleeping against Jack's shoulder exhaustion, finally overwhelming the fear that had kept her alert during captivity. Jack watched the highway markers pass and thought about the 3 men he'd killed in under 2 minutes. Felt nothing about their deaths except satisfaction that they wouldn't threaten anyone else's children. Maybe that made him a monster. Maybe it made him a soldier. Maybe the distinction didn't matter when you were protecting the people you'd promised to keep safe. His phone buzzed with a text from Matheson. Interrogated the 3 survivors. They confirm Richard Blackwell ordered the operation. But Blackwell's not in the country. Private jet filed flight plan to Grand Cayman 6 hours ago. He's running. Jack typed back, let him run. We know where he'll have to come back. Because Richard needed access to Sterling Technologies' server vault to complete whatever he was planning. Needed to activate Sentinel using Vivian's biometric data that his team had presumably collected during the brief kidnapping. Running bought him time, but didn't solve his fundamental problem. The technology he was trying to steal required physical presence at the source. And when Richard came back, Jack would be waiting. The FBI safe house occupied a nondescript colonial in Lexington, guarded by federal agents who checked credentials 3 times before allowing entry. Catherine Brennan sat propped against pillows in the master bedroom, shoulder bandaged, an arm in a sling, but eyes alert and focused. Elena had arrived 30 minutes earlier with Vivian, who refused to leave her mother's side even to sleep. Jack found them in the living room, Elena on the couch, with Vivian curled against her, both of them wearing exhaustion like weighted blankets. He settled into the armchair across from them and pulled out the microchip David had hidden in the compass. Catherine says this is a kill switch for Project Sentinel. Can you explain what that means operationally? Catherine's voice came from the bedroom doorway where she'd appeared despite medical orders to rest. It means we can shut down the entire Sentinel system remotely and permanently. Every protocol, every encryption key, every backdoor Richard created, all of it becomes useless simultaneously. Elena stroked Vivian's hair with automatic maternal comfort. But David spent 5 years building Sentinel. It was supposed to revolutionize secure communications for the military and intelligence agencies. If we destroy it, we prevent it from being sold to hostile nations who'll use it against American interests. Catherine crossed to the table where Jack had placed the chip. David built the kill switch because he understood that some technology is too dangerous to exist if it can't be controlled absolutely. He chose protection over legacy. Jack leaned forwards, elbows on knees. What are the activation requirements? Physical proximity to the server core in Sterling Technologies Sublevel 5. The kill switch has to interface directly with Sentinel's architecture to execute the shutdown sequence. Catherine picked up the chip carefully. And we need to be absolutely certain we want to do this because there's no reversing it. Once Sentinel goes offline, it's gone forever. How long would activation take? 30 seconds for the chip to interface, another 90 for the shutdown sequence to propagate through the entire system. 2 minutes total. Catherine set the chip down like it might explode. But here's the critical piece. Richard knows the kill switch exists. David documented its creation in encrypted files I found while recovering evidence, which means Richard's plan isn't just to steal Sentinel, it's to neutralize the kill switch first, then activate the system using Vivian's biometric data. Elena's arms tightened around her daughter. How would he neutralize it? By accessing the server vault before we do, and installing countermeasures that block the shutdown sequence. Catherine pulled up schematics on her tablet, despite the obvious pain movement caused. But there's a vulnerability in his timeline. He's in the Cayman Islands right now, at least 8 hours from Boston, even with a private jet. We have a window to activate the kill switch before he returns. No, Jack's voice came flat and certain. We wait for him to come back. Elena's eyes flashed. Why would we give him the opportunity to stop us? Because killing Sentinel solves one problem, but leaves Richard free to try again with different technology. We need him here in the vault, caught in the act with evidence that can't be explained away. Jack met Elena's gaze directly. We set a trap, let him think he's won, then we take him down permanently. You want to use my daughter as bait. Elena's voice could have flash-frozen water. I want to use the threat of your daughter as bait while keeping her somewhere Richard can't possibly reach her. Jack's tone gentled fractionally. Elena, we can destroy Sentinel today, and Richard just disappears into the Cayman Islands with 15 million in stolen money and connections to rebuild his operation elsewhere. Or we can be patient for 48 hours, let him come to us, and end this permanently. Vivian stirred against Elena's side voice, small and sleepy. I want the bad man to go away forever. The room went silent. Everyone looked at the 7-year-old who'd survived kidnapping and still had clarity about objectives. Elena's jaw clenched. Where would you hide her? Matheson's compound. The same place Declan is. Full military security, no possible access without multiple layers of armed response. Jack pulled his phone and showed her satellite imagery of the facility perimeter, fencing guard towers, overlapping fields of fire. It's designed to repel military-grade assault. Richard can't touch her there, Catherine interjected quietly. There's another consideration. If we activate the kill switch now, we lose leverage. Sentinel is worth billions because it works. The moment it's dead, Richard loses his buyers, and we lose evidence of who those buyers were. But if we wait, let him make contact with foreign operatives, we document everything. Then when FBI raids happen, we catch the entire network instead of just one man. Elena closed her eyes clearly, cycling through scenarios and probabilities. When she opened them again, something had shifted. The CEO who built empires had reached a decision. 48 hours. Then we activate the kill switch regardless of whether Richard has returned. I won't leave Sentinel active indefinitely waiting for him to make a move. She looked at Jack. And you're right about Vivian. She goes to New Hampshire tonight. You were right the first time we argued about this. I let fear make me stupid. Fear doesn't make you stupid, it makes you human. Jack stood and crossed to kneel in front of the couch, meeting Vivian's eyes. Hey, soldier, how do you feel about going to meet Declan and see the woods and the lake Uncle Grant told you about? Vivian considered this with the gravity children have brought to major decisions. Will you come too? Not tonight. I have to stay here and make sure the bad man can't hurt anyone else. But I promise you when this is over, we're all going fishing together. You meet Declan and your mom. And Admiral Patches. Especially Admiral Patches. He's earned a vacation. Vivian smiled, small and tentative, but real. Elena pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead and somehow maintained composure while agreeing to send away the person she loved most in the world. Matheson arrived 2 hours later driving an armored SUV that had probably been borrowed from federal asset forfeiture. Vivian left clutching Admiral Patches and a bag of clothes Elena had packed with shaking hands. Jack watched the taillights disappear into Massachusetts darkness and felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper into his bones. If anything happened to Vivian or Declan while he was playing tactical games with Richard Blackwell, no amount of justice would balance that equation. Elena stood beside him in the driveway, arms wrapped around herself against November cold. I feel like I'm sending her away forever. You're sending her away for 48 hours so she can have a forever. Jack didn't touch her, despite the instinct to provide comfort. David chose to die so you and Vivian could live. Don't dishonor that by second-guessing the hard choices. Is that from the SEAL Handbook, Chapter 3, Emotional Manipulation Through Guilt? Chapter 7, actually, Chapter 3 is about explosives. Jack almost smiled. Come on, we have a trap to set and a company to save. Sterling Technologies at midnight felt different than during business hours, emptier, echoing full of shadows that during daylight passed as architecture. Jack and Elena descended to sub-level 5 using executive elevator access that bypassed normal security protocols. The server vault occupied the entire basement level, temperature-controlled and humidity-regulated to protect equipment worth hundreds of millions. Brennan, who'd discharged herself from the safe house against medical advice, met them at the vault entrance with schematics and tactical planning that would have impressed Jack's SEAL commanders. We're staging a false flag operation. Make it look like we've already activated the kill switch and Sentinel is offline when really we're just running a simulation that mimics shutdown protocols. She pulled up code on a tablet, scrolling through lines Jack couldn't parse but recognized as complex. When Richard accesses the vault to verify Sentinel's status, the simulation shows system dead. He'll think we beat him to activation. That's when he reveals his contingency plan, whatever backup strategy he's developed for recovering the technology. You're assuming he has a backup plan. Elena studied the vault's interior through reinforced glass. What if he just cuts his losses and runs? Then we've lost nothing except time and gained 48 hours of Vivian being safe. Jack checked the SIG in his shoulder holster more from habit than necessity. But my read on Richard says he's too invested to quit. He's spent 5 years building this operation. Killed David to protect it. Orchestrated Catherine's shooting and Vivian's kidnapping. Men who commit that far don't surrender when obstacles appear. Catherine nodded agreement. I've analyzed his financial records. He's leveraged everything, mortgaged his house, maxed credit lines, borrowed against his Sterling Technologies stock options. If this deal fails, he's bankrupt and facing criminal charges. He has to see it through. They spent 3 hours configuring the false shutdown sequence, while FBI agents installed hidden cameras and recording equipment throughout the vault. By 3 a.m., everything was ready. The trap set the bait, positioned the hunters waiting in concealment. Jack found Elena in David's old office on sublevel 4, staring at whiteboards still covered with equations and diagrams from 5 years ago. She looked smaller, somehow diminished by exhaustion and the weight of decisions that could destroy what her husband had built. You should sleep. Jack leaned against the doorframe. We've got 48 hours minimum before Richard makes his move. I keep thinking about what David wrote in the letter. Elena traced one of the equations with her finger. I've spent 5 years dying slowly, turning myself into ice because feeling anything hurt too much. And Vivian's been watching that. Learning that loss means freezing yourself solid so nothing can hurt you again. Jack crossed the office and stood beside her, close enough to provide presence without demanding contact. Lisa told me something similar the week before she died. Said Declan needed to see me cry so he'd know crying was allowed. That being strong didn't mean being stone. Did you cry? Not until 6 months after the funeral. Then I broke down in the middle of the grocery store because they were out of the apple juice she used to buy. Jack's voice roughened with memory. Declan saw me, asked if I was okay. I told him no, I wasn't okay, and that was allowed. We cried together in the cereal aisle while other shoppers pretended not to notice. Elena's hand found his without conscious decision, fingers interlacing with the kind of tentative contact that acknowledged intimacy without demanding definition. When this is over, when Richard is caught and the network is burned and Sentinel is offline, what happens to us? What do you want to happen? I don't know, I just know that you make me feel less frozen. And that terrifies me because the last time I let myself care about someone, the world took him away and I almost didn't survive the loss. She turned to face him fully. But maybe almost not surviving isn't the same as actually dying. Maybe there's a difference between existing and living. Jack understood what she was offering, not promises or certainties, but possibility. The chance that two broken people might fit together in ways that honored their losses while building something new. He cupped her face with his free hand, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. I can't give you the life David gave you. The money and the security and the confidence that tomorrow will look like today. I'm a maintenance worker with a beat-up truck in medical debt and a son who needs expensive medications monthly. Jack held her gaze. But I can give you honesty. I can give you someone who understands grief without trying to fix it. I can give you my best effort every single day to be worthy of the trust you're placing in me. Elena closed the distance between them and kissed him, not desperate like in the hospital, but deliberate, intentional, choosing connection despite the fear that connection meant vulnerability to future pain. Jack returned the kiss with equal care, where that this moment mattered more than tactics or strategy or the trap they were setting. When they separated, Elena rested her forehead against his. I'm trying to learn that lesson. Me too. Jack pulled her into a proper embrace, feeling her relax against him with the kind of trust that had to be earned through action, rather than promised through words. We'll figure it out together, one day at a time, one crisis at a time. They stood in David's old office, holding each other, while fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the city slept peacefully outside, unaware that in basement levels beneath corporate towers, people made plans for war disguised as business. Richard Blackwell returned to Boston 41 hours after Vivian's rescue private jet landing at a regional airport that catered to wealthy clients who valued discretion over convenience. FBI surveillance tracked him from touchdown to a hotel in Cambridge where he checked in under an alias and made 3 encrypted phone calls before midnight. Jack received the updates via text from Matheson, who'd coordinated with federal agents to monitor Richard's movements without alerting him to the surveillance. Target is mobile, projecting vault access attempt between 0200 and 0400 hours. Confirm ready status. Jack typed back from his position in the sub-level 5 observation room. Ready, let him come. Elena sat beside him watching security feeds that covered every angle of the vault approach. Catherine monitored system diagnostics from a workstation, ensuring the false shutdown sequence maintained perfect simulation. Webb's tactical team waited in positions that allowed rapid response without visible presence. The trap was set. Now they waited for prey to walk into it. Richard appeared on cameras at 0237 hours, approaching through the executive elevator, using credentials that should have been revoked when he fled the country, but remained active as part of the trap's design. He moved with confidence born from 5 years of unchallenged access, not realizing that every step was being recorded by equipment he couldn't detect. The vault door required biometric authentication plus a 12-digit code. Richard provided both without hesitation. The door unsealed with a hiss of pressurized air, and he entered, crossing immediately to the central terminal where Sentinel's status could be verified. Jack watched him work through the security feeds, reading body language for tells that might indicate awareness of the trap. Richard's shoulders tensed when the terminal displayed the shutdown sequence, the false indication that Sentinel had been killed. His hands clenched. His jaw worked like he was grinding teeth hard enough to crack enamel. Then he smiled. Jack's instincts screamed warning half a second before Richard pulled a phone and made a call. The audio equipment caught his voice clearly through vault acoustics. It's done. They activated the kill switch like we anticipated. Move to Phase 2. Elena grabbed Jack's arm. Phase 2. What's Phase 2? Catherine's fingers flew across her keyboard, accessing systems and protocols Jack couldn't follow. Her face went pale. He's uploaded a virus. It's using the kill switch activation as a vector to penetrate Sentinel's security from the inside. The shutdown sequence isn't destroying the system, it's rewriting it to give him complete control. Jack was moving before conscious thought completed, weapon drawn, crossing from the observation room to the vault entrance, while Webb's team mobilized behind him. Richard looked up as the vault door opened, smiled, widening into something predatory. Morrison, right on schedule. Step away from the terminal. Jack's SIG tracked Richard's center mass. Hands where I can see them. Richard raised his hands slowly, phone still gripped in his right. You know what the difference is between you and David? He understood that some wars can't be won through violence alone. You're still playing soldier when this stopped being a military operation 5 years ago. You want to talk about David? Jack's voice dropped to something dangerous. Let's talk about Kandahar, about how you executed my commanding officer because he chose 4 civilians over your wounded pride. Richard's expression shifted, surprise first, then calculation, finally settling into cold acceptance. You know about Ghost Mountain. I know David left you behind in 2017 to save innocent lives. I know you decided revenge mattered more than honor. Jack moved closer, weapon never wavering. I know you spent 5 years planning his murder and building an operation to steal the technology he died protecting. David didn't die protecting technology. He died protecting a lie. Richard's hands lowered slightly, despite Jack's warning. The mission in Kandahar was a setup from the beginning. Intelligence wanted that compound because it contained evidence of Pentagon officials selling secrets. David discovered the truth that the corruption reached into our own command structure. They killed him to keep him quiet. That's why you're selling Sentinel to foreign operatives, because you're fighting corruption. Jack's laugh came bitter. You're not a whistleblower. You're a traitor who kidnapped a 7-year-old girl and shot an innocent woman in a parking garage. Collateral damage in a war David started when he chose strangers over his own team. Richard's voice hardened. I lost everything in Ghost Mountain. My career, my pension, My marriage, 3 years of physical therapy, learning to walk again. And David got promoted, got the girl, got the company and the legacy, and the hero's funeral. Elena's voice came from the doorway, cold enough to shatter steel. He got a bullet in the back from someone he trusted. That's what he got. Richard's attention shifted to her, and something flickered in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or old attraction that had curdled into resentment. Elena, still beautiful, still cold. David used to joke that you were perfect because you understood that duty came before feeling. Don't talk about my husband like you knew him. Elena moved to stand beside Jack. You murdered him. You don't get to claim understanding. I murdered him because he was going to expose the entire network. Pentagon officials, defense contractors, intelligence assets, all of them profiting from technology sales while American soldiers died in conflicts they manufactured. Richard pulled up files on his phone, displaying them for Jack and Elena to see. David planned to go public, upload everything to WikiLeaks, contact journalists, blow the whole operation wide open. He would have destroyed national security to satisfy his moral certainty. Jack studied the file's communications between David and investigative reporters, draft documents outlining the conspiracy timelines, coordinating massive simultaneous disclosure. If accurate, it confirmed what Matheson had hinted. David hadn't just discovered corruption, he'd been planning to burn it all down regardless of consequences. So you shot him in the back to protect national security. Jack's tone dripped contempt. Is that the story you tell yourself? I shot him to protect the mission. The technology sales were funding black operations that Congress would never approve. Weapons development that kept America ahead of hostile nations. Intelligence gathering that prevented terrorist attacks before they happened. Richard's voice carried genuine conviction. David wanted to expose everything because he thought transparency mattered more than results. I chose results. Elena stepped forward close enough that Richard could have grabbed her if he'd been stupid enough to try on. My husband chose honor over convenience, chose protecting innocence over protecting colleagues. You call that moral certainty like it's weakness. I call it integrity. Integrity doesn't win wars. It doesn't stop enemies. It doesn't. The gunshot came from behind Richard. Catherine Brennan standing in the vault entrance with a Glock that FBI had authorized for her protection. The round caught Richard high in the chest, spinning him backward into the terminal. He collapsed against equipment worth millions, blood spreading across his tactical vest in patterns that said the bullet had found something vital. Jack moved immediately, kicking Richard's phone away while checking for other weapons. Found a backup pistol in an ankle holster and confiscated it. Richard coughed, wetly, blood flecking his lips. Catherine, interesting. Didn't expect you to be the one. Catherine lowered the Glock, hands shaking from adrenaline, and the shooting pain moving her injured shoulder must have caused. You shot me in a parking garage, tried to kidnap a child I've known since birth. You don't get to act surprised when someone shoots back. Richard's laugh turned into a cough that produced more blood. The virus is already uploaded. Even with me dead, it's rewriting Sentinel's architecture. In 6 hours, the system reboots under my control. My contacts in Beijing will have access to American military encryption. You failed. Jack looked at Catherine, who'd crossed to the terminal and was typing with her good hand while the wounded arm hung useless. Can you stop it? Maybe. Probably. The virus is sophisticated, but David built countermeasures into Sentinel's core code that Richard didn't know about. Her fingers flew across keys. But I need the kill switch chip. Now. Elena pulled the microchip from her pocket and handed it over. Catherine inserted it into a USB adapter and executed commands Jack couldn't follow. Code scrolled across screens while Richard's breathing grew more labored and Webb's team secured the vault perimeter. Got it. The virus is quarantined and Sentinel's shutting down for real now. Catherine pulled the chip free and held it up like a trophy. 90 seconds and David's legacy is safe. Richard's eyes focused on Elena with effort that spoke to determination overriding physiology. He really loved you. Used to show me pictures of Vivian, talk about teaching her to code, to think, to question everything. He wanted her to be better than he was. Elena knelt beside him, and Jack saw something shift in her expression, not forgiveness, but recognition that Richard had been human before choices made him monstrous. He wanted you to be better too. That's why he tried to save those civilians, even when it meant leaving you behind. He believed people could choose honor even when convenience offered easier paths. I know, that's why I hated him. Richard's voice faded to barely audible. Morrison promised me something. Jack moved closer despite every instinct, screaming that Richard deserved nothing. What? Don't let Vivian forget her father was a good man. Even if, even if the files I showed you make him look naive or stupid or dangerous. He tried. He really tried to make things better. I won't let her forget. Richard smiled genuine for the first time since Jack had met him. Brothers forever. That's what he used to say. Tell him I'm sorry. Then he was gone, eyes going distant as whatever internal injuries Catherine's shot had caused finally claimed him. Jack checked for pulse out of habit, found nothing stood, and pulled Elena to her feet and away from the body. Webb called for medical examiner and federal agents to process the scene. Catherine finished executing the kill switch, watching as 5 years of David's work dissolved into digital nothingness to prevent it from being used as a weapon. Elena leaned against Jack in exhaustion, finally overwhelming the adrenaline that had sustained her through crisis. It's really over. The shooting part, the paperwork is going to take months. Jack wrapped an arm around her shoulders. But yeah, Richard's dead sentinel's offline. The network is compromised enough that FBI can start rolling up everyone involved. We won. It doesn't feel like winning. It never does when good people die and bad people almost succeed. Jack guided her toward the elevator. But Vivian's safe. Declan's safe. Catherine survived. We're still standing. Sometimes that's as close to winning as we get. Days later, Jack drove to New Hampshire through autumn landscapes aflame with color. Matheson's compound appeared through morning mist walls and guard towers that had kept both children safe while adults fought wars in Boston basements. Declan emerged from the main house wearing clothes that actually fit, carrying a drawing of dinosaurs and rabbits defending a castle together. Dad. Declan launched himself at Jack with 7-year-old enthusiasm. I caught 6 fish, and Colonel Matheson says I'm a natural tactician. Jack hugged his son with desperate relief. A tactician, that's impressive, soldier. It means I'm good at planning. Declan studied his father. You look different, less worried. Feel different. Jack ruffled his son's hair. Ready to go home? Is home the same or different? The question carried weight. Jack considered carefully. Still the same for now, but maybe not forever. Would that be okay? Declan studied him with Lisa's perceptive eyes. Does it involve Ms. Elena and Vivian? Maybe. Vivian's cool, and Ms. Elena makes you smile. Declan shouldered his backpack. Plus Admiral Patches needs a friend, so we should probably live close enough to share custody. Jack laughed, real and unforced. Shared custody of a stuffed rabbit. I'll add that to the negotiation list. Vivian appeared in the doorway, Admiral Patches tucked under her arm. The children reunited like they'd been separated for years instead of days, immediately planning their next adventure. Matheson emerged behind them. They've been planning this reunion for 2 weeks, drew up custody agreements for Admiral Patches. It's legally binding, according to them. Jack almost smiled. Good to know. Matheson's tone shifted serious. David would be proud. You kept his family safe. That's what brothers do. Brothers forever. Jack's voice roughened, even after death. Especially after death. They drove back to Boston, both children, both fathers building, to watch something that felt like family. Jack's apartment awaited cramped, but somehow more welcoming, with the promise of change ahead. Elena and Vivian met them there. Dinner happened naturally, 4 people around a table meant for 2 laughter and stories, and the kind of easy domesticity Jack had thought died with Lisa. When evening came and Elena made motions toward leaving, Vivian protested with childhood determination. Can we stay? Please. Elena looked at Jack. He nodded. Stay. There's pasta. Won't be fancy, but there's enough. They stayed, ate and laughed and pretended everything was normal until normal felt possible instead of performative. When Vivian fell asleep on Jack's couch, Elena carried her to the car with careful reverence. Jack walked them down to the street. Thank you. Elena shifted Vivian's weight. For today, for normal. Normal's good. Jack opened the car door. Elena, I meant what I said, about wanting to find out what this is. I know, I want that too. She settled Vivian in the back seat. Give me time to figure out how to be human again. Thawing takes patience. I've got patience, Jack's voice gentled, and a son planning shared rabbit custody, so we think we're committed whether we intend to be. Elena smiled warm and real. Shared custody. I can work with that. She kissed him briefly, then drove into Boston night. Jack stood watching taillights fade, feeling something unfamiliar bloom in his chest. Hope, maybe, or recognition that grief didn't have to be permanent. 1 year later, Jack stood on the same granite steps where he'd first met Vivian. 4 sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, turkey and Swiss cut diagonally. Elena sat beside him wearing jeans instead of suits, hair loose instead of severe. Vivian and Declan chased pigeons while the city moved around them. None of the rushing executives noticed the family having lunch on the steps where everything had started. This is weird, right? Elena accepted her sandwich with amusement. We could eat anywhere. I own a building. But you want sandwiches on cold steps. Tradition matters. Jack took a bite. This is where I met your daughter, where I promised to protect her without knowing who she was. Vivian ran over breathless. Dad, Jack Declan says dinosaurs could beat robots. But I say robots have better technology. Who's right? Jack caught Elena's eye, both recognizing the easy way Vivian called him Dad Jack now. Natural evolution into permanence. I think dinosaurs and robots should team up against vegetables. Dad, Declan protested, equally breathless. You're supposed to encourage healthy eating. I contain multitudes. Jack handed out sandwiches. Besides, Admiral Patches says rebellion against broccoli is justified if you eat carrots. Admiral Patches sat between the children, missing eye now replaced with a blue button Declan had sewn on. The rabbit had become sacred symbol of survival and friendship in broken families rebuilding. Elena pulled an envelope from her purse. Colonel Matheson sent this, something he found in classified archives. She unfolded pages covered in David's handwriting, a journal entry from 1 week before Kandahar. If I don't make it back, I hope Morrison finds Elena and Vivian. I hope he gives them what I couldn't, a future. Tell him brothers forever means family forever. Some promises don't die with the people who made them. They transfer to the living and grow into something bigger. I chose Morrison because he's a better man than he knows. He'll protect them, not by dying for them, but by living for them. That's the harder choice, but it's the right one. The entry ended. Vivian leaned against Jack's shoulder while Declan pressed against his other side. 2 children who had lost parents finding wholeness in wreckage. He knew. Jack's voice came rough. David knew exactly what he was doing. He planned everything. Elena's hand found Jack's. Why would his death be different? Colonel Matheson appeared summoned for this moment. Uncle Ray, Vivian launched herself at him. I brought something for Admiral Patches. He produced a tiny metal military decoration miniaturized for stuffed animals. For bravery under fire, Vivian pinned it to Admiral Patches with reverence. He's a real war hero now. Declan examined the medal. Can my laser dinosaur get one? Matheson pulled out a second metal deadpan, already processed the paperwork. The children ran off displaying medals to pigeons. Adults stood acknowledging the strangeness of this family built from loss. Matheson spoke first. David would have loved this, his legacy living in people instead of technology. You think he'd approve? Elena's question carried uncertainty. Of me moving on? I think he'd approve of you living instead of surviving. Matheson clapped Jack's shoulder, and Morrison keeping promises David couldn't keep because life kept going. Jack pulled Elena closer. We're trying. Not always succeeding, but trying. That's all anyone can do. Matheson handed over a photograph, 3 soldiers in desert camouflage. David's handwriting on back, brothers forever doesn't end with death. It transforms into family. Jack studied the image, feeling loss mixed with gratitude. Grief could coexist with joy if you stop demanding emotions exist in isolation. The sun set over Boston, turning the harbor liquid gold. 4 people and 1 decorated rabbit sat on granite steps building family from war's wreckage. 2 ghosts watched from wherever ghosts went, David and Lisa smiling at the imperfect, beautiful mess their survivors had made. Sometimes protection meant sacrifice, sometimes survival, sometimes choosing to build new families without forgetting the ones lost. Jack wrapped his arms around Elena and pulled their children close, surrounded by people who mattered most, and understood finally what David had been trying to teach across 5 years in one brass compass. Brothers Forever wasn't about dying together. It was about living for each other even after death separated you, about keeping promises through action, about transforming loss into legacy by refusing to let grief be the final word. The city lights came on one by one, and Jack Morrison, former Navy SEAL, current maintenance worker, improbable father of two, and partner to a woman loved through patient thawing of frozen hearts, looked at his makeshift family and thought, this is what winning looks like.